You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are the Seattle Kraken.
But let's start from the beginning. It's a question I like to ask people, especially in the sports space. But when did you fall in love with sports? And even more specifically, when did you fall in love with hockey? Because you're also a hockey player.
Correct. I was a kid, Erica, with tremendously low self-esteem. I was the type of kid back in the day that would be in my room listening to the radio to depressing ballads. They call it yacht rock now. But back in the day, I'd be listening to, singer-songwriters, from Gordon Lightfoot to Jim Croce to Harry Chapin to the Carpenters. And I wasn't listening to the happy songs. I was listening to the depressing songs, the loneliness songs, the breakup songs, even though I didn't know what a breakup was back then. But I just could relate to it because I was a lonely girl. I really didn't have friends. It's not like I grew up in this awful community. My parents were middle-class parents. I'm one of 4 kids, and I just felt very alone. I was a kid with glasses, really thick glasses back in the day. And, I just had tremendously low self-esteem. So I started, to get to your earlier question, I used sports to fill that void, to have something to look forward to. And I'm talking about being a fan first. So when my dad is we grew up on Long Island, and New York teams was my dad's jam. Not all New York teams, but, for him, it was the Rangers, the football Giants. Those were the 2 big ones. He loved the Yankees. I grew to love the Mets. And then we both loved the Knicks. And that's where it began for me. Actually, I was a Knicks fan first of all the sports, because it was the early 70s and they were actually winning championships.
Yeah.
I know youngsters can't fathom that the Knicks were actually relevant, but back in the day they were. And I remember this classic story. My dad took me to a shopping mall on Long Island. It's called the Smith Haven Mall. I don't even know if it's still there. But I think right after the Knicks won that second championship in the early 70s, there's 3 New York Knicks stars came to the mall. And each one was positioned at a corner of the mall on a stage. And I'll tell you the things we remember, Erica. I remember because Walt Clyde Frazier was my favorite because he was so cool and, fun, and obviously a great player. And I was a little girl. I was 8 years old, and I kind of snuck right up to the front of the stage there. And I remember him looking down at me and saying, "Wow." Now I looked at it "Oh, wow, he was talking to me, blah, 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 really excited little girl." But he was just so excited at the turnout, I'm sure. and so that's my first real memory.
Wow.
Besides, watching games with my dad, of just really getting the whole athlete thing and really finding this connection. And sports really did that for me. Music did it for me, and sports did it for me. Filled a void because I had such low self-esteem.
Well, wow. What a story. I mean, I can relate as a New Yorker myself. I grew up in the 90s, so we thought we were going to get a taste of the 70s Knicks, and it didn't quite work out.
No, it didn't. But but didn't we get into it? It was
we
really
did.
exciting.
I still remember. Go New York, go New York, go.
Yeah, that run against, we had a run up against David Robinson and the San Antonio Spurs, sadly. But we had something magical. And as a matter of fact, I ran into Alan Houston at a Rangers game this postseason, and we were reminiscing and talking about the good old days and how close they indeed came. But yeah, Erica, I mean, Once a fan, always a fan.
That's true. And I love that you bring that to the work that you do, because now, me being in the space and not coming from journalism school or anything, it's definitely something that I notice is something that is a little bit of a lost art in some ways. I think yourself, or I mean, Sarah Spain is another great example. She is unabashedly a Chicago sports fan, and I love that. But before we go into that, I do want to get to your time at ESPN. Obviously, 30 years, that's amazing. But I wonder, when you were playing hockey, did you ever have an idea? I mean, I know that you know sports, and a lot of us who know sports, of course, we listen to, especially growing up in New York, WFAN, even,
Right.
after Mets games. It used to drive me crazy. I'm like, we just saw the game. Why do we have to listen to the radio? And now I'm the person talking post game. But I wonder if you ever made a connection to what a career in sports could be if you weren't the athlete.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I mean, it was something because I played hockey, which gave me purpose and value. By the way, being a goalie,
Mhm.
because you're either the person that saves the game or you're not, right? I mean, you can blow the game, but I loved that challenge, and I loved having people depend on me uh, for that monumental task. This girl who, like me, who, didn't go to her senior prom, who played on the boys team in high school my senior year, which was much more exciting than going to a senior prom could ever have been. Um, I always felt like because I played, sure, it's a different level than professionals, but I felt I could relate and I could be a better broadcaster because I kind of know what you feel as an athlete. Plus, I'm so competitive. And I never even thought about that, Erica. Like, if I wasn't an athlete, would I be as competitive? And I think I probably would have been, because that's the New Yorker in me, right? I mean, we just keep pushing, and we really don't take no for an answer.
Yeah.
And and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of my New York roots. That's why I did not work on getting rid of my accent. And I'm proud of that. Like, people say, "Oh, Linda," I'm like, before ESPN, I worked in Seattle, Washington at KIRO TV. It was my big break, actually, after I was working 7 days a week doing freelance radio in New York, from everywhere from, WFAN to ABC Radio Network. But the Seattle job really lifted me, because it gave me a chance to do TV. The reason why I bring that up is, back in the 89, I worked there from 1989, right before I got the ESPN job in July of 92. People couldn't handle my New York accent. And so back then I was trying to lose it, thinking that was the way to go. But thank goodness I got to ESPN a few years before they allowed us to let our personalities come out. And that's was a huge step in my 30-year tenure at ESPN, when they hired a real advertising company to put together those commercials for us and bring out our personalities for This Is Sports Center. And it really helped the breakthrough of Sports Center as must-see TV. And, I'd be remiss. And every time I do one of these interviews, a retrospective interviews on, moments, periods of time, I bring up my good friend, the late, great Stuart Scott, because this man helped change everything at ESPN.
Right now, I'm going to tell you about Built Bar. I told you this last week, but I finally got to try I tried the mud pie puffs. Wow, so good. So good. So now they have a new flavor that I'm super excited about as well. The coconut brownie chunk Built Bar. But you got to stop drooling and listen to this one, because it is a chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate, like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. See, the puff flavor is not just a marshmallow, but when it has a specialty flavor, like they kind of add that flavor to the puff. So amazing. And all Built Bars are made with a collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently. And it has so many health benefits. I've talked about it, your hair, your nails, things like that. And of course, it tastes good while you're doing everything you can to feel at your best. The best part of the puffs is that they taste amazing. It's just what you need to get the protein intake, keep the sugar low, and also satisfy your sweet tooth. So if you need a quick healthy snack, Built Bar is an excellent source of protein. So go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15. That's going to get you 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCKED15 at built.com. Happy snacking.
He didn't want to hear from anyone that, oh, look, Stuart, you can't be a North Carolina Tar Heel fan. You can't let people know, blah, blah, blah. And I would watch Stuart, do his thing and let people know how much of a fan he was to the Tar Heels. That was in his DNA. And, that helped me let myself out and be the Rangers and Giants fan that everybody associate me with, and Met fan. But it was combination of just Stuart being Stuart, and then ESPN, spending some serious money on and realizing it's okay to have the anchors' personalities come out, because that was the thing that when people say, Linda, how did you last so long? Or even back in the day, like when things were exploding all around you, still there were main cog of Sports Center. And I said, it's because I haven't changed. My goal always, Erica, was to, be a fan first, because that doesn't change. That's me. That's my authentic self. But to connect to the viewer. The ESPN fan is a sports nut, like me, right? Like you. Like, and I knew if I can connect to them and get that across to them through the screen, that I too am like them, then we would have something there and it would be everlasting.
Thinking about, and the reason I asked you about if you had ever thought as an athlete about being a broadcaster is because for people like me who grew up, and I happen to be a New Yorker, but you reached much wider than that with your tenure at ESPN. But you were one of the people that I remember seeing. And so there's other representation that sometimes I didn't always see, but I always saw women. I saw Robin Roberts. I saw you mentioned Stuart Scott. I saw these are people who, as you said, taught me how to be a sports fan. But I would imagine that even as I'm experiencing that being on the other side of the camera was a unique experience. ESPN had that great 30 for 30, let them wear towels. And, you were coming right off of a lot of that. And so what have you seen as the transition, even just in your career, as far as women in sports broadcast?
Yeah, a couple of things there, especially with the women thing and what I had to deal with. Thank goodness women nowadays don't have to deal with it. Most athletes have always been good to me because they watched me. It was the only game in town, Sports Center. So they knew I knew what I was talking about. And that was really important to me, to get the athletes' respect. Maybe I put them up on pedestals, Erica. I'm guilty as charged. Again, that comes with being a fan. I did put a bunch of them on pedestals, and a couple of them that came back to haunt me, because whether it was religious beliefs by these certain athletes, or they just had a pre-existing condition mentally about having a woman in the locker room, in the clubhouse, or wherever. I had to fight through that and battle through that. I'm not going to say that there was a time. Many years ago in 2008, I wrote a funny look at myself, an autobiography called Conehead, a no holds barred account of breaking into the boys club. And I brought this up where I had a situation in Seattle with the Seahawks, that a star player, I went into the locker room after a Monday night game the next day at practice. I'm waiting outside like all the media did back then for the players to come out. And he basically ripped my head off in front of my colleagues, my fellow reporters, sports reporters, Seattle beat writers, you name it. And I looked around and why is he doing that? Like maybe I was in my own little bubble, Erica, where I was like, I didn't do anything wrong. I was just doing my job. I don't get it. And sadly, at that time, which was 1990, I looked around at my colleagues and fellow reporters, and they didn't come to my aid, and that was disturbing. And that's how much things have changed for the better.
Yeah.
For women. Now, since that time, many years later, that player wrote me a letter and apologized for his actions. Yes, a handwritten letter.
Wow.
Type of thing. Realized he was at fault. But, I've since moved on from that. But I bring up these stories, and that's just one of them, or whether you're, I'm covering, I remember covering a bunch of Met games in New York, Yankee games. And just get treated awful in the clubhouse. Like baseball players were always the worst of the big four sports. They just seem like they grew up in a cave. Like, I'd be like, what did I do? I didn't do anything. I'm not looking at you. I want to get the hell in and out. You make me uncomfortable. Forget me making you uncomfortable, right? I mean,
very true.
I mean, I didn't make these rules. So, and I try when I talk to young people, especially young women, I try to help them in other ways to, put themselves on the map, to be them, which is very important. Don't try to be anyone else, but realize that things are so much better now. And instead of like trying to dig up things that are like, well, why wasn't this handed to me or given to me or what? I mean, look around. I mean, the oyster is yours. It's open for you to conquer. Sure. Is there still room to improve for women everywhere in the sports field? Absolutely. Do we still have to prove ourselves more so than men? Yes, we do. That hasn't changed. But for me and for those young women like yourself, Erica, that's okay. I mean, I always talk about, one of the stories about it took a young hockey player named Sean Dursey and I keep repeating this story because I love this kid so much. He plays for the LA Kings. He's 23 years old. And I was telling him how I went through my whole career wanting to prove people wrong. And he's like, yeah, I felt that way too. And then I realized, you know what? It's negative. Sean told me, he goes, instead of proving people wrong, he says, I tried to then prove to people that supported me that they were right all along. And I just love that positive spin. I was like, oh my God, this guy's 23 years old and he just taught me something at this age of the game. And it was just great. So that's what I try to share with young women like yourself as well, that let's look at how far we have come. And yes, we have a ways to go, but we'll get there. And we have to keep supporting each other. And I want to throw in one other thing, Erica, before I forget, because I think it's the most important. I think we have a long way to go in the aspect of having women in management. I mean, that's where we need women. We need women that can hire. We need women that could use their expertise and guidance to help other women move up in the ranks. Until we have more women in management positions that can, be the CFOs and the CEOs, the big change that we're looking for will be a ways away. But I think we're heading in that direction. We have to keep pushing for that.
Wow, I love that. I mean, literally, you are talking to me. I mean, and Michelle is here, but I also feel that you're talking to me. I mean, and I love it. I think that there's so much. I love that story of taking that positive spin and just what I hear, and it fits with what you have been saying is sit within yourself and what you bring and what your goals are. And I think that's such great advice. And I mentioned I did want to go back to radio because I think we're in this really, mean, we're talking on it's a video podcast, but it's a podcast. And I think that, again, being from New York, I can honestly say I don't really know what sports radio is other places, but New York sports radio is kind of a big deal. And the personalities are wide ranging, and so is the volume. The volume is up. And so
Right.
I want to ask you, when you think about now where the industry is, what are some of the things that you learned coming up in sports radio that you think now fit, even as media has changed with new media and video becoming more popular? What are the things, as far as your roots and in your repertoire and your radio toolkit, that you rely on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I can't tell you enough, Erica, how radio helped me become the broadcaster that I am today. Sports talk radio. And thank goodness I fill in part-time on Sirius XM, Mad Dog Sports Radio, and Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. And having those stages have helped me hone my skills, whether it's soloing for 3 hours and taking phone calls, so connecting with the fans that way. But that has helped me in my first year in the podcast scheme with Emily Kaplan, our In the Crease podcast, which we just finished the first year, because some things never change. And what hasn't changed over the years, whether you're hosting a podcast or you're hosting your sports talk radio, is that you are having a conversation. You don't want to sound like you're reading something. You want to sound like you're having a conversation, that you're just talking with someone and they happen to be eavesdropping, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's basically what the podcast is. They're eavesdropping on your conversation that you're having, even if it's with yourself. And that's how I am when I'm hosting sports talk radio. Like, I get to fill in a lot for Pat McAfee. And also filling in for Christopher Mad Dog Russo a lot as well. And why those two are very good. They're two different styles. The dog, as you know, growing up in New York, Erica, I mean, the guy's a legend. He just yells and screams. I love it. Like, and it's real.
Yeah.
Like, it really bothers him. He's not like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to take this take today so I can get calls and get people fired up. No, he's like, okay, what's going on today? All right, here, how do I feel about it? Okay. And then he fires away like the dog he is. And then you have Pat McAfee, who kind of has followed that Dan Patrick playbook of having a bunch of people around him. And, like it or not, and of course he'll use every F word in the book, and and he's allowed to do it, whatever. That's okay. I mean, it's a different style. Yeah. But he has people around him yesing him and saying how, yeah, you're right, Pat, great. But I think it's harder to do what the dog does and what I do when I'm solo, taking phone calls, getting my opinions in, and not being shy about it. I think that's important. So whether you have a podcast, whether you host the sports talk radio show, you must have opinions.
Let's go to one of our other sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With ever increasing makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why would you endure the often pointless or seemingly intimidating question about, is this an EX or an LX or whatever the case is? How many makes, how many models for something that basically looks the same? Who knows? So save time and money when you use rockauto.com. It's a family-owned business that's been serving auto parts customers online for over 20 years, and they have everything that you could need: brake parts, tail lamp, motor oil, and even new carpet. So go to rockauto.com and see all the parts available for your car, your vehicle, whatever you're driving, and then type Locked On in their "How did you hear about us" box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com.
So, but man, it takes a lot of work. People think you can show up and do radio or get a podcast together. You really have to be prepared, What
are some of your biggest takeaways from the return of the NHL to ESPN as you are celebrating 30 years.
The hockey was great. I was hoping for this. I was one of the few people that left the light on for it. It finally returned. I think ESPN overall did a great job getting back into it. The sport has changed in the 17 years since it last had it for the better. Speed and skill and strength and personalities. They sort of had their mind made up on certain talent groups. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some changes heading into next season. Just like you don't rest on your laurels. You make adjustments. You hone things to be even better than you were in your first year. And I believe that's what ESPN will do. But it was just so great to bring in the casual sports fan to hockey in the day of social media. But that is the impact of having such an amazing sport on ESPN. And I think and for me personally, I never thought in this day and age, in my stage of my career, that I'd have a chance to be between the benches, which I was for about 10 games this year. What an experience for me. Just loved it. Loved everything about it, being ice level, giving my opinions when they allowed me to. And I always have opinions, Erica. Fabulous job in their first year. So I think the transition is on, and it's only going to get better next year.
I do want to, since we have you here in the Locked On Kraken studio, and I know that you have expertise and an interest in goaltending, and I heard you talking about what Colorado might need to do. There's a lot of things I think that Seattle probably is eyeing for the off season, but I would love to get your thoughts on goaltending and what you make of the really interesting, shall we say, goaltending situation as it transpired with injuries and COVID for the Seattle Kraken.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I know I was a little hard on Darcy Kemper of Colorado, but I'm sorry, it's the truth. I was hard on Andre Vasilevsky, so in the podcast, and he's the best at it. But I'm a big believer in Ron Francis as the Seattle Kraken GM. I mean, he spoke about it. Erica, you know this already. All the adversity. It's not cliche. It was fact. They had tremendous adversity with their injuries. Right off the get-go, their most popular player, Brandon Tanev, see ya, thanks for playing. You didn't even play. It's just like, oh my God, he was the fan favorite. And then, and he's such a good kid too. He's great. And so I was one of those people before I got sucked in. Before the season, I thought they were going to make the playoffs. I really thought, because I was a believer in that goaltending tandem.
Yeah.
Before the season began. And I was stunned how bad Philip Grubauer was.
Yeah.
I felt bad for him, but he was still bad. He got paid all that money, and he stunk. And then Chris Drieger, who I thought, he'd be a quality backup. He wasn't in enough to kind of get anything going. And then he was constantly hurt. And now he has that torn ACL. And so the good news for Ron Francis is that, as you know, he's got the 4th overall pick. Sure, it could have been number 1, but that's the way the ping pong ball bounces. He's got the 4th overall pick in the draft. He's got 12 picks in this year's draft. So he can make some trades. He can be active in free agency. Remember, he got rid of tons of players at the deadline.
Oh, yeah.
And so, and that was all good. I mean, I get that. I just hope you didn't go out and get a Mark Giordano jersey, But, so there's a lot of room to improve. But this is not for Kraken fans. This ain't going to happen overnight. It's going to take like 3 more years. And the good news is they have like about 35 picks over the next 3 years.
Yep.
So it's what he's going to do with them. Do I want them to, improve on this past year? You bet I do. I expect them to. There's not going to be any COVID excuse anymore, even though it did hit them hard and the injuries hit them hard. But they need to improve their goaltending. And they need, they might end up drafting that 4th pick. There's a defenseman. I can't think of the guy's name, Nemchik or something. Yep. He might be the guy. I would take him because I'm assuming the top 3 will be gone. But if there is some kind of, who knows, something going on, get ready to get one of those top three guys. You won't get Shane Wright, but the other two. But, so I think it can't, I hate to say it, but I can't get any worse, Erica. It's not going to get any worse than it was. And I really hope Philip Grubauer got some help. I hope he lost weight. I hope he got, figured stuff out with his goalie coach and see if he can regain some of that magic that we only saw flashes of.
Yeah.
That's what bothers me. Young team like the Kraken, you need your goalie.
Yes.
You can't let up a bad goal every game.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I feel like when I play this for Locked On Kraken fans, I'm hoping that they are just somewhere either raging or just cracking up, hysterically cracking up. Because if I don't mention at least 5 of those points every podcast, going back to my New York roots and ranting, oh my goodness. Oof. There was one whole episode where I just was like, you have to Wakanda it, Philip. Show them who you are. Like, come on.
Yeah, I don't think that resonated. I don't think it resonated to him. I'm still waiting for that to happen.
Right. I didn't yell it loud enough.
Yeah, you didn't yell it loud enough. You need a messenger to get it to him. But, here's and again, try to find the positive. The building is great.
Yep.
Everyone was blown away by the building. Climate Pledge Arena. That did not fail the high expectations. Okay. That was great. We believe in the building. Yeah. Good for you, Erica. Speak in your mind. Tell it like it is. Bring in that New York, that New York swag to Seattle.
That's right.
And because, Seattle people are so damn nice and patient. I mean, let's see how the season starts,
Yeah.
But I just want to see improvement out of the Kraken.
It has to happen. It has to.
Yeah.
Like you said, there's nowhere to go but up. And, I feel like it was fated, right? The last time there was a Seattle hockey team, they were the Metropolitans, and then they let a Mets fan host Locked On Kraken. So I love it.
Well, what do you think about our Mets this year? They're kind of hit a skid now, but hopefully Scherzer and DeGrom come back and we'll be okay.
Oh, I would love to see it. And very full and well, not only as a Mets fan, but as a New York fan, I'm like, listen, one game at a time.
I know.
It's a long season, one game at a time. I've been here before. I know how this ends. Well, Linda, thank you so much for your time. This has been just a bunch of fun. And truly, like I said, I as someone who's now in the industry, have learned so much from not just your career, but this conversation. But I want to ask you just one more question. When it comes to people like myself, and not just women, but other people coming up in the game and wanting to present the game to new fans, what would you say is one piece of advice that you think we should all bring with us as we do hockey coverage?
Yeah, that's an easy one. I mean, I always push for them to see a game in person. That's not original. That's always out there. It's a difference maker. That's how I try to get. I always make a point of saying, it's one thing to watch it on a screen, but it's another to be there in person. And then it's another to go to a playoff game.
Oh.
So there are different levels. There's watching it on a screen. There's going to a regular season game in person. And then there's going to a playoff game and then get back to me. And that's usually when they're like, and plus the whole in-game, in-arena entertainment is so much fun for a family. I mean, it's just great for kids. They do such a great job.
Yeah.
That has improved so much. The other thing that I think is really important, and I think if I was like that commissioner for a day thing, I don't understand why I don't see more merch.
Oh, nice.
Like in airports, in everywhere, like in souvenir shops. Why don't I see merchandise,
like this.
logos, anything with the logos on in their respective cities where people are visiting? Tell me that, Erica.
I mean, I don't know. Is that the humble hockey that we always hear about? That humble hockey persona that we got to crack through with our New York selves?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I think we need to do something. First, we need our own thought. We need to create some fun swag that we can do it and get the NHL permission, of course. But like, I can't tell you enough, like, of the travels that I have done. And you go into an airport and into a store and you see, every sports team except the NHL team. That's got to change.
I
Yeah.
agree. I love it. I did not expect we mentioned Sarah Spain earlier, but the Sarah Spain commish for the day, that was perfect. I love it. I'm with you. Let's see what we can do. I feel like New Yorkers, we can do anything. And we do too. That's why we get that's why we get the reputation we do, for better or worse. We can do anything.
That's right. That's right. It's working so far.
There you
Knock on
go.
wood, Erica.
There you go. 30 years and counting. Linda Cohn, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations. And I'm excited for what comes next for you and certainly for hockey at ESPN.
Erica, first of all, thanks for having me. Continued success. Everything that you have accomplished, you did it on your own. You created it. No one handed you anything. And that to me is the greatest. And anytime you have an open invite to me, because I just love the way you've gone about it.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that.